you can't improve mental health by going on a diet or going for a run. It's not that simple.
Isn't enough money to support everyone who's got severe mental health.
So if you've got services, that's great, but making sure they're accessible.
My headspace appointments are in Hawthorn. I don't have a car, so by the time I get the 59 tram down to Flinders Street Station, wait for a train that's going to take me to Glenferrie Station and then walk to my headspace appointment, that ends up being an hour.
Not having to have your parents take you to an appointment when there's stigma attached to that makes you uncomfortable and you're not going to discuss everything.
We need to alleviate the pressures.
We need programs for young people to get together to discuss things like mental health or just things, more recreation programs, sport programs, libraries, places where people can get together, talk to each other and experience really valuable connections.
Making sure that there's a secondary service, not just this idea of primary and tertiary. You're going to lose us, and you're not going to just lose us as patients. You're going to lose our lives because you don't care.
Don't tell us what it is that you think young people find difficult. Listen to us when we tell you.
So for young people, I think one of the biggest things is actually educating them on stuff about mental health, self-care and well-being. So not just going into stuff like this is what depression is, this is what anxiety is, but how to intrinsically motivate yourself and how to set goals and really succeed in life. Stuff should be implemented within the curriculum so that youth from a young age, from prep, so that they understand how to live, how to be, how to find who they are.
Young people want to feel like we have a voice. We know we have a voice amongst our own community, but we're not seeing that translated across the board. We're not seeing politicians putting that into action, and we're not feeling like you really care about what we're saying. We care about the environment, we care about mental health, we care about pretty much everything that's happening in this world.
We're all Australians and we all need a chance to thrive and be happy.
But we're not going to have this country, let alone this world, if things don't change.
Take on what they're saying, pay attention.
Listen to us.
Listen to the people.
Listen to us, please.
So NAIDOC Week is certainly an important celebration of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture, and we are very proud to support and acknowledge the week with this flag raising ceremony.
Hi everyone, I'm Councillor Cam Nation and welcome to Moonee Valley City Council's Winterfest. We're here all day
and night, right through the school holidays.
And when, you know all the details, when does it close? When's the last session?
It's on the 14th, and if you actually want to come along with your family too, there are special family days. Wednesday, Thursday, Fridays, you can come and skate with the family.
And you can have your last session at night at 7 o'clock. And make sure you book through the Moonee Valley website.
Absolutely. We can't wait to see you down here.
Bring your mates, get down here by bike, by walk, by car, by fly, by train, by tram, any way you want. Best way to have a couple of hours in your school halls.
Some stupid reason, they put me in charge of trying out the ice rink.
I love it.
Okay, let's take two.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
The ice slide at North Essendon Village is now officially open as part of Winterfest, so come down to Leek Street between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m.
Lots of activities and things going on here. It's a great place to be. Come and grab a coffee, bring your children, bring your kids and go for a nice slide.
Welcome everyone to this ordinary meeting of Council for the 9th of July 2019, which is now officially open. A warm welcome to members of the public gallery who are here tonight, as well as those joining us from home via live streaming. Thank you for being with us. As well as being live streamed, the recording of this meeting will also be available on our website, so attendees in the gallery are advised that their presence may be recorded. I'd also like to ask that mobile phones please be switched to silent just during the course of the meeting. On behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, spirits, community members past and present. I'd also like to extend this respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Councillors, I have received a request for approved leave of absence from Councillor Marshall for tonight's meeting. So, councillors, can I please have a motion that the leave be noted? Councillor Thrace, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Byrne. Any questions? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. I'd now like to confirm the minutes. Can I please have a mover and a seconder that the minutes from the ordinary meeting of Council held on Tuesday the 25th of June be confirmed? Councillor Sypek. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Lawrence, thank you. Any questions regarding the confirmation of minutes? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. I must also note an apology from Councillor Gachi Marici for tonight's meeting too. Thank you. I better get that moved and seconded actually. So can I please have a motion that the apology be noted? Councillor Byrne moved and seconded. Councillor Nation, thank you. Any questions? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Does any councillor have a conflict of interest in any item on the agenda this evening, please? No. Councillors, I do not believe we have any presentations nor petitions and joint letters. So I'll move to public question time, and we have received questions from 2 community members for tonight's meeting. I'll now ask Rose Isa to come to the lectern to read her first question, and I'll ask the relevant director or manager to provide a response. I'll then ask Rose to read her second question. So there must be 2 questions from 1 community member. Sorry. Thank you, Rose.
Thanks, Mayor. So my first question is, has there ever been an agreement, an offer of agreement between a representative of the state government and Moonee Valley City Council regarding the provision of or funding for a new Flemington Community Centre related to the Flemington Estate redevelopment? And if so, what was the nature and outcome of such offer or agreement?
Thank you, Rose. I'll ask Ms Keating to answer that question for you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The response is there has not ever been an agreement for funding a new Flemington Community Centre related to the Flemington housing redevelopment.
My second question is, there was a statement at the council meeting on 11th of June to the effect that the proposed $40 million allocation for the Flemington Community Hub included a $10 million contingency. If this statement was correct, what is its meaning?
I'll ask Ms Keating again to answer that.
Thank you again, Madam Mayor. I'm just going to read from the screen in terms of response. As part of Council's planning for its major projects, a contingency is allowed to address any future event or circumstances, which is possible but cannot be predicted with certainty. It's best practice and common for projects of this scale. We are not able to provide details of contingency amounts, as this information could prejudice any contractual arrangements in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rose. I shall now move on to reports from special committees, and there is one report tonight. Who's tabling the report from the special committees? Maybe there's no special committee report tonight. Okay. Grants Assessment Special Committee meeting. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor Sypek, thank you. Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Cusack, thank you. Are there any questions regarding this motion, councillors? Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak to the item? Straight to the vote? Put that to the vote? Okay. I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. The next report is 10.1, and it is in regards to a planning application at 36 Wisewood Street, Flemington, construction of 7 dwellings and removal of easement. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Cusack?
Yes, Mayor, I have an alternative motion that I would like to move.
Do you want to read that out, please?
I don't know whether it's got into the system or not. Yes, it is on the board, but I'll have to read it obviously for the people at home. The council issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant a permit in relation to planning permit application number MV 5622018 for the construction of 7 dwellings and removal of easements at 36 Wisewood Street, Flemington, Lot 2 on PS 006391 on the following grounds. 1. The proposal fails to meet the overarching objective and strategies of Clause 15.1 to 2 urban design principles of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme and would result in an urban design outcome that fails to positively contribute to the local character and fails to provide an appropriate transition to height from the corner of the site to the residential interface within Wisewood Street. 2. The proposal fails to meet the strategies contained within Clause 21.06-4, Objectives and Strategies Urban Design of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme and would result in development that fails to appropriately respond to its location and the surrounding context. 3. The bulk scale, form and layout of the proposal fails to meet Clause 55.02 of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme, Neighbourhood Character and Infrastructure Objectives, and 21.06-1 Objectives and Strategies Neighbourhood Character, as it does not respect the character of the existing neighbourhood or integrate well with the streetscapes. 4. The proposal will cause adverse traffic impacts on the surrounding area which will be substantial and unreasonable, including during public events in the surrounding area. 5. The proposal fails to satisfy the following standards contained within Clause 55, 2 or more dwellings on a lot, of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme, and does not achieve an acceptable outcome in terms of the following objectives. Clause 55.3-1, street setback. Clause 55.04-1, side and rear setbacks. Clause 55, Clause 55.06-2, private open space. D. Clause 55.06-2, front fences. And that's it.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Nation? Thank you. Councillors, are there any questions regarding this motion? Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak to the item?
Well, yes, Mayor. This is a matter that has come before us that is clearly one where there is going to be a development on this block no matter what. And that development, what it looks like, will shape what Wisewood Street is going to be like for many, many years to come. We have a number of developments down Epsom Road that are on similar sorts of blocks or corners as you go along Epsom Road. They're actually contained in the papers that you have in front of you, those ones that are on the corners of Sandown and Doncaster streets in particular. Also, you have number 1 Ascot Vale Road, you have Ascot Vale Road and Wisewood, and so on like that. The predominant feature of all of those, not that I like them all at all, but they are there, is that they face onto, the majority of it faces onto the major road. They predominantly have an interface with Epsom Road or Ascot Vale Road. And in this case, while it's the shape of the block and the geography of the place, and it's not the developer's fault in that sense, what we're experiencing here is significant creep down along Wisewood Street. Now, I appreciate that the house that that would abut this at number 34 is of a contemporary design. Now, we know that we can't get away from contemporary design, but there are issues around contemporary design that we need to think about in terms of how it works in the general interface with this rather interesting triangle of Ascot Vale. And while we have flat roofs as part of the contemporary design, I'm concerned that there is a significant amount of this is given over to entertaining rather than to creating green open space. I also worry about the fact that the contemporary design, as I see it, tips the balance at that end of Wisewood Street away from what is predominantly a street where people enjoy the amenity of Californian bungalows and the likes of that. We also see that in this contemporary design, a palette that is starting to invade into this neighbourhood that is something of a concern. And it's a concern that is popping up across the whole of the municipality. There is this strong reliance on dark colours, in particular blacks, very dark charcoals, and the likes of that, that are shaping neighbourhoods away from those wonderful traditional colour schemes that were associated with the kinds of buildings that these contemporary buildings are being placed with. And that is the colour schemes that are around the California bungalows, and which incorporate obviously a lot of terracotta red, the light greys, some light pastel colours, and their matching relationship to gardens. So what we're getting is a significant change in the urban form, and this is the concern that I have, that while I know that we will ultimately end up with something that is about developing a new building there, I have a concern that this is a step too far. There are questions, as I've raised in the motion, in respect of the setbacks. There are questions in respect of the private open spaces and front fences. But when we start to think about how they mesh up against other longer term priorities that we have for our municipality in respect of our urban forest, the fact that we want to look at a greening of the municipality, is it sufficient to suggest that a block of land that has been cleared and then replaces it with planting boxes and some trees, yes, but getting into more and more hard spaces, is that a realistic response to what we have strategically sought to do in our municipality? So I'll leave it at there for the time being and see how it goes on the floor.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Councillor Nation, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Look, I'm happy to concur with Councillor Cusack in support a refusal for this application. And I think one of the points Councillor Cusack made in regards to it being a uniquely shaped block, very much a uniquely shaped block, and it's probably one of those instances where on a block of this shape, to get right up to that 60% site coverage, which you're allowed to in Res Code, it throws out all the setbacks. And you can see in the analysis with Res Code, street, side and rear setbacks are all non-compliant. And it is a result of the shape of the block, but obviously it's been purchased, and you know the shape of the block when you purchase it. The problem with that shape as well, it means that some of the other components of our planning scheme, such as private open space, even daylight to windows, are non-compliant as well. If the majority of the bulk faced onto Epsom Road, that would be on par with a lot of what is along there. But that interface with Wisewold Street, the 6 townhouses all fronting onto it, with that little corner parcel, is encroaching into that residential street. And you only need to go a little bit further up. There's a Sandown Street where there's been a little bit of a creep and it's turned into apartment heaven. So I'm more than happy to support this refusal. I think it is the right way to go. I think it is a clear example of you can't make 60% site coverage work on every single block, and the needs to go back to the drawing board or VCAT, and have a look at how you could make this work, taking into account that sensitive interface on Wisewold Street, and giving something that's a little bit more complementary to what exists down that street. It is quite in your face. That double story on that modern one at 34, it does have a nice big green wedge as well, which this wouldn't. So, sorry for that ramble, but I support you, Councillor Cusack.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? No? I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. The next report is at 10.2. Regards a planning application at 97 Glass Street, Essendon, construction of 6 dwellings. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Sypek, thank you. Are there any questions regarding this motion, councillors? No. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 97 Glass Street, Essendon, 6 two-bedroom apartments, 6 car parking spaces, site coverage of only 49%, garden area 35%. They're the stats. Consultation for this was on May 20th, 2019 with the Mayor and myself, Councillor Sharp. Unfortunately, none of the 22 objectors came to the consultation, which was unfortunate because we didn't get to hear their side of the argument, as it were. The applicant did come and their design information and replies to the formal objections were heard. The proposal, and this is where it meets nearly all of the compliance aspects of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme that the planners have detailed in the report. It's noted that the planners have imposed a rear and side setback condition on the proposal, and there are no other variations under the Clause 55 were considered. The endorsement conditions have also stated that setbacks, as I mentioned, the mailbox height controls, vegetation height controls, particularly at the entrance to the development, parking bay controls, widening of vehicle crossings, etc. And there's a strict adherence to Moonee Valley Planning Scheme requirements. Other adherence includes the BESS assessment, WSUD, CSMP. These are all I can never say that word, but you know what I mean. These have been mentioned in Officer's report and the conditioning. The zoning's GRZ. The site is 150 metres from the 59 tram in Mount Alexander Road and 660 metres from Glenbervie Station. Building height is 9.3, which is less than the 11 metre maximum. There's a lot of things that are pro and meet all the compliance aspects that this application puts forward, including design, amenity, waste collection, overdevelopment and neighbourhood character, although that's possibly a change. The fact remains that that part of Glass Street has a lot of old, so we call them 60s and 70s block form apartment blocks, which are pretty ugly. This will be probably a far more attractive apartment block with only 6, instead of a lot of these ones have upwards of 12, even 15. There's also development on the other side of Glass Street towards Mount Alexander Road, and of course there's a few other developments going on in the area. The point that I'm torn with is that this is another development that's going on in North Essendon. It is another aspect that have we got too much development? What is enough development? So that's the pros, the cons, the for and against, shall we say. However, the thought does cross my mind that if this went to VCAT, where would we sit? And the fellow members of VCAT, given that it does comply in every sense of the word other than the setbacks, which they're going to be conditioned against anyway, would probably just say, well, it's a pretty good application, bang. And I'm not preempting what they would say, of course, because we can't possibly do that. But there's probably good cause to say that that's possibly where it's going to head. So this is where I'm at odds. It complies. It is more development in North Essendon, but if we reject this, it goes to VCAT for appeal, and there's probably a damn good chance it'll go through. So I put that to my fellow councillors, and I'm probably leaning towards, yes, it's a development and it's a controlled development, and it does meet all the compliance aspects, and we're fixing the minor conditions that are there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. As Councillor Lawrence was speaking to this item, I was just ticking off everything that he said, so he's very little for me to say, and I completely agree with all the points that Councillor Lawrence has made in regards to this application.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Would any other councillor like to speak to this motion? No, I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Sypek, Councillor Nation, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Lawrence. All those against? Councillor Serace and Councillor Sharp. That is carried. The next item is 10.3, and it relates to a development at 19 to 21 Park Street and 2 to 4 Smith Street, Moonee Ponds. Construction of 10 dwellings with basement parking and variation and removal of easements. Councillors, do I have a motion, please? Councillor Cusack.
Mayor, I'd like to move the officer's recommendations to motion, but include a new Part A. So the officer's recommendation becomes Part B, and Part A is that Council undertakes a localised traffic management assessment 6 months following the completion of the development contemplated in Part B.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cusack. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Nation. Thank you. Councillors, are there any questions regarding this motion? No. Councillor Cusack, would you like to speak to the motion?
Before I start, Mayor, I just wanted to also acknowledge that this is NAIDOC week, and as a consequence I'm wearing a T-shirt from Central Australia from the Arenti people. The motion that we have in front of us is as a consequence of a resubmission of plans that came to Council following a proposal that was tabled here some time ago. The original development was very, very substantial, including around about 30 dwellings. What has been proposed now is to get rid of the apartments and to turn those into 10 townhouses, if you like. The development, and the reason I'm supporting this, is that I'm not sure that we can actually go back to VCAT a second time and argue substantially that this shouldn't occur in an area where we've got 2,000 square metre, or near enough to 2,000 square metre area, block. The substantial size of the townhouses, the triple stories, will face onto Park Street. Therefore, there will be 5 doubles that locate towards the eastern side of the boundary, which is the laneway that separates the rears of the properties in Margaret Street, and number 10 and 9 and 10 dwellings will double stories facing onto Smith Street. The critical issue in this is that in redeveloping the proposal, the developers have addressed pretty closely most of the issues that were raised by VCAT, and on the basis of that substance, it's, as I said earlier, terribly difficult to go back to VCAT and say no again. What we have proposed, though, by putting in Part A, is to address a matter that is of serious concern to both council and obviously those residents who objected to this a second time around, and that is the whole question of traffic movement and therefore parking in and around the Smith Street side of things. There is no entrance, and never has been proposed to be an entrance, off Park Street for any of these developments, so as a consequence there will be no permits provided to people living in those front apartments who would like to park in Park Street. They just can't. They need to access their driveway, the driveway and the car parks that are provided. The question in Smith Street is clearly about the size of Smith Street and its capacity to carry additional cars. And for those who have walked down there, and I'm not telling the residents to, about what they know, I'm talking about anybody else who is in the neighbourhood, Smith Street's incredibly narrow, and then we have a very narrow little lane that takes people out onto Margaret Street. We also have a cobbled lane where a fair amount of traffic is going to go up and down. My concerns about the cobbled lane are its gradual degradation, but that is something that we also need to monitor. The question about how much additional movement in and out of this apartment dwelling compared to what was originally proposed is that there is a substantial reduction. And I'm cognizant, however, that any additional cars in those very small streets is always going to be an issue. But the reality also is that there's always going to be some sort of development. So if you take it down from, 10 townhouses down to 8, you're still going to have, I would argue, a substantial traffic issue. So managing this traffic issue is an issue that council is going to have to absorb and continue to work with. It's the same as in a number of areas where there are small streets and small areas for turning, manoeuvring and so on like that, such as we experience in Flemington. So while I'm not perfectly happy with this, I don't believe that you can win an argument at VCAT on one issue, which is around traffic and parking, and I don't know that we've got any sensible grounds to be able to go back to VCAT and argue that what is being proposed now is not within what VCAT supported in its decision.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Councillor Nation.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, probably first of all off the bat, I wholeheartedly understand for people who live around this area that this application is considerably more being put onto those 3 blocks and is a lot worse than what exists at present. However, in reviewing this report, there were 2 things I did. One was I had a look back at my notes from when it first came before council. And secondly, I had a look at the VCAT ruling and whether or not this application addresses the matters raised in that VCAT ruling. Now, when it initially came before us as a 30 dwelling big apartment block, I mentioned the height, I mentioned the lack of articulation between any of it, and my notes were that it presented like the Titanic when looking at it from the side. This new application separates the 3 built forms. It drops that height from 3 stories down to 2 stories, except for a couple of the dwellings. There were a couple of other notes about traffic that I made and landscaping as well, and the interface with the laneway. When I reviewed it against the VCAT ruling, it is clear that the applicant has gone to considerable effort to make this application as compliant as possible with the 2 VCAT members' notes. And you can see on page 73 of the agenda, each of 73 and 74, members Rundle and Nevegna's comments, item 76, 77, 78, and then a good comparison on agenda page 74 of how the old and the new stack up and how the new application addresses the points, or some of the key points raised in that VCAT ruling. So on that basis, given that this does address some of my considerable concerns the first time it came before us, and that it does address many, if not most, of the points raised by VCAT members, then I have to fall in line here with Councillor Cusack and support the motion to the recommendation to grant a permit. As I said at the start, it is considerably more than what's already there, and I completely understand that for people who have been living next door to single-storey houses, it is a lot to put up with. It will be a considerable amount of development to put up with, but it's a 2,000 square metre block. The applicant has gone to the effort to make this adhere as much as possible to that VCAT ruling, and therefore I will support this motion to grant a permit.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Suarez?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will speak to it. I'm actually speaking against the motion. Having been down to this site, and I understand, I've heard what Councillor Cusack says and I've heard what Councillor Nation has said, just maybe a point of clarification in the report on page 63. The fifth proposed paragraph down says the proposal demonstrates an appropriate level of compliance. I just want to know what qualifies an appropriate level of compliance. If someone could answer that.
Are you asking
point
for
of clarification on what qualifies an appropriate level? What is the appropriate level?
I'll ask Petrus to respond to that, if you can, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In response to the question, in the report on page 70, table 5, indicates the requirements in terms of the assessment that the officers believe haven't been complied with. And as you can see, there aren't too many of them that haven't been complied with, and the rest of the report also indicates the number of compliances, and that's the wording that has been used. The appropriate compliance is more compliance than non-compliances, really.
So that's what qualifies the appropriateness?
It's part of the full assessment, yes.
Okay. So further down in the report, I mean, and looking at the site and considering we're talking about 4 lots here, we've got 2 to 4 Smith Street and we've got 19 to 21 Park Street. As Councillor Cusack said, you know, sure, they could probably come back and put maybe a dual occupancy application on each of these. The reality, though, is that there's one single property on 4 lots. So at the end of the day, they could redevelop on each site, they could do other things. I'm not the owner and it's their choice what they want to do, and I understand that they've come back with a proposal to put in 10 units. My biggest concern, and it always is and it always will be, is the traffic issue and the parking issue. And whilst I understand that they've put in a proposal to put in 20 car parking spaces in a basement, the reality is that I guess it comes down to first in, best dressed. There's been a lot of other applications that have come to this council in this particular pocket and region, and unfortunately, whilst council have refused those applications, VCAT have overturned them. But the impact in the total number of developments that are taking place in this vicinity, and if we add this one on to the already exhausted streetscape that is trying to cope with the amount of cars travelling through that area, parking in that area, and then with the proposed increase in rail lines and Park Street crossing being closed longer, the whole area is going to become gridlocked. We're already landlocked and it's going to become gridlocked. So I don't know how we go about... Look, I don't have an issue with going to VCAT.
Do you need an
constantly.
extension of time, Councillor?
Thank you, just another minute maybe. I think that, you know, they may say no again to this proposal. So for me, it's unfortunate that, you know, it will come back with different proposals, but my main concern is that these things will keep arising with us, and we have the opportunity to keep refusing these things and seeing where they go based on those probabilities that the traffic and the car parking are going to be major issues which need to be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thrace. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Cusack, would you like to close?
Well, I take your points, Councillor Thrace, and I'm not got a tin ear for them. But on the other hand, I'm sort of still locked into, my worry is still, how do we resurrect a debate at VCAT when there's been substantial change? As Councillor Nation has pointed out, that the critical points that were made at VCAT were about the size, bulk and scale and the articulation and the large unrelenting wall that was down Margaret Street. And so this design has addressed all of, much of that. It's also lowered it in height. Yes, it's not perfect, and I didn't intend to try and convey that either. But on the other hand, it's a difficult question. And just a point of fact, I think what we've got is 4 lots that have been combined. So it's not just one house that's being knocked over. There's a number of properties, and so yes, there is some chancer effort in this because people did sell out to a good idea theoretically. It was popularised in the press at the time. The parking issues in Park Street are not just those that will relate to this development. Parking without a permit in that area will have to be something that is critically enforced and so on like that. And so we can't rely on that as being a measure in respect of a planning matter. I wish we could, because if we could, we'd bloody well disappear a hell of a lot of bloody planning matters, especially down my neck of the woods.
Do you need an extension of time, Councillor?
Just a second or two, yeah. And so the only comfort that we can provide in terms of the parking and traffic is that developers are required to provide a traffic report in the process of lodging their development. There has never been, to my knowledge, or very few times have ever been, in my knowledge, in this council, where we've actually decided to go back, and this is what I'm asking you to do, is to support the opportunity to go back and review what has gone on and what the outcome of that is. It very, very seldom has been put up by any councillor sitting in this chamber or any other councillor I know over my experience. And so we need to, that's the only parachute that I can provide for the people who live in that area. And I appreciate that so many people have gone into great deal of effort to preserve their properties, to renovate them, to do things like that. But we have the tyranny of the car, and we've got to look at many more options from a council perspective rather than just in respect of this one development. And unfortunately, that's what it is.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Nation, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack. All those against? Councillor Serace, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Lawrence. That is carried. Next item is 10.4, proposed at-call hard waste collection. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Lawrence, thank you. Councillors, are there any questions regarding this item?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I'd like to put in a slight amendment if the mover and seconder would be happy to listen to my amendment. I'd like
Councillor, before you go on, sorry, this is just about asking questions, so if you can just hold off on that just until we hear from the mover and the seconder. So, no other questions, I assume. Councillor Byrne, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will. Waste is a huge issue for our council and for all councils at the moment. There's no doubt about that. Historically, in Moonee Valley, we've had 2 hard waste collections a year, June being the prunings and the branches, and towards the end of the year, the hard rubbish. And as everyone around this table would know now, last year in Moonee Valley, the hard rubbish collection was an absolute disaster. It was a mess across our whole city, and there's no skirting that issue at all. What we do know is that our hard rubbish collection is extremely highly valued by our residents. People love that there is a hard rubbish collection, but how we are doing it hasn't been working, and we as a council need to think of other ways to make it more efficient and to improve some of the issues that we've had with it. Some of the issues that we had last year, because it was so highly utilised over a approximately 6 to 8 week period of time, we had so much rubbish dumped over so many streets in Moonee Valley. It looked like a dumping ground, the whole city, for so long. It took so long to get our trucks out, or the services trucks out, to pick up the waste. And this was in the lead up to Christmas, when people were having Christmas functions and whatnot, and I'm sure that there were plenty of calls received from people saying, when is this rubbish going to get picked up? And unfortunately, it just took too long. With so much hard rubbish on the nature strips, it also led to a lot of illegal dumping. We don't know exactly where the illegal dumping was coming from, potentially from other municipalities that don't have a great collection system. Once people had already put it out, they would then come and collect it. People would often have the second bite and put more out, and it just kept going and going and going. The other issue that we have is the way we were doing our hard rubbish collection was it was somewhat of a blanket collection, except for mattresses. So mattresses would be picked up separately, but everything else would get picked up and taken to landfill. Now that really doesn't fit in with our MV 2040 strategy in terms of how we really want to reduce that, reduce what's going into landfill. We really want to be focusing on recycling things from the hard rubbish collection. So we have had to rethink waste, and that is what this report is doing. So what has been proposed is that Moonee Valley households and residents will get 2 free collections per year and additional pickups for a fee. The collections are size dependent, so you can't necessarily put everything out, but you've got your, you do have 2 to use it, and if you go over that, you can pay a fee. And one of the other great things is that you can do it at a time that suits you, not when council determines it. So for some people who want to do a spring clean out, they can do it then. If they want to do it over school holidays, they can do it then. For uni students who might be travelling, you can do it then. Moving out of an apartment, whatnot. And I think that just gives people a better option when it comes to waste. It's something that we have to take seriously. We are taking seriously. And I strongly believe that this will lead to a better outcome than what we saw at the end of last year.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Byrne for her insightful dialogue on the rubbish and hard waste collection in Moonee Valley. Rates, roads and rubbish. Those were the 3 R's that every council hung their mantle on, and what do you know, we're back on the rubbish. But it is an important one, and it's certainly an important one to this municipality, and one that I concur with. The horrific problem, as Councillor Byrne pointed out, that the last hard rubbish collection was a monumental disaster, to tell you the truth. We did look like a rubbish dump. Every neighbourhood in the municipality copped it, and you know, we had excessive large amounts of hard waste on our nature strips, and certainly there was illegal dumping, and from residents, I dare say, from our neighbouring councils, but we won't name any of those, and there's no proof that that happened, of course. But we certainly had a far greater amount of rubbish than we've had in the previous preceding years, and it exponentially was going up, and it really took off. It was an extra cost burden to the waste collection, and who cops that? Of course, our ratepayers. They're the ones who end up paying more for collecting this excessive amount of hard rubbish. So what do we have? We've got a new system, potentially, and just can I point out that we will still have a hard rubbish collection system. This is not a cancelling of it, it's just a new system, and I think that needs to be pointed out to our listeners, viewers I should say, and listeners. So we have got a better system for residents, we've got a better system for council, obviously for collecting, a far better system for ratepayers, less mess all round. So it's a win-win-win, and if you want to have more of your waste collected, well, you can. You've got to pay for it over and above what the maximum amount is, but there is that opportunity, as Councillor Byrne pointed out. So I commend this to my fellow councillors and applaud the council officers for bringing it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Cusack?
Yes, and I'll just be quick. I think that the critical thing about this is that it puts the users back in charge of the game. And that was, I think, the greatest bugbear that came out of that issue over the last 12 months, because people were completely powerless to do anything. Once they put the rubbish out, all they saw was their neighbourhoods deteriorate. And so flipping this coin over and putting people back in charge is the most critical thing. And it's about timing. People have the need to have clean-outs at different times of the year. And there's also the question about sort of how do you organise your prunings and so on like that as well. So you're actually got more flexibility in this, because at one point, while you've got the two free collections, you may in fact book another collection, pay for it, but think about the costs that would have been associated with getting down to the depot, transferring the stuff over, using a car and all those sorts of things. And for those people who don't have cars and all the rest of it, this becomes a substantial matter of equity in our community, and especially for older people, residents who aren't comfortable about moving around. The biggest question that I have in all of this, of course, is that we've got to start getting right into the body corporates and start moving with them somehow around this, because as I left today and I came up Moonee Crescent from Ascot Vale, in both on either side of the road, in front of the flats and in front of a vacant block of land, we've got stuff just being dumped, and that is people who are moving out at the end of leases and tenancies and whatever like that. And we still cop that in our municipality. And where we have body corporates, surely we can have a conversation with them about how they can encourage new tenants, new renters to get into this. Maybe we do it through real estate agents. I'm not sure what the campaign is, but we really need to make sure that that is very much factored into the mindset of people who are temporarily coming into our municipality, or maybe not necessarily temporarily, but transitioning in terms of their housing. So I absolutely applaud this development. It puts us somewhere near the 21st century.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Sypek?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to move a slight amendment to this item, and the amendment is to get a report brought back to council after 12 months to see, what the figures are, how it worked, and whether the community were happy with it. So get a bit of community feedback to if this method has an improvement to what it was. So it's just a report to come back after 12 months.
Okay. So you'd like to put up a formal amendment. So do you have that written down? Do you have wording that we could...
Just a report brought back in 12 months' time.
Okay, are you right to... Yep. Do I have a seconder for Councillor Sypek's motion, please? Councillor Servais. Okay. So Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak just to your alternative?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sort of playing devil's advocate here a little bit. I know a lot of people still like to put out their rubbish and put it out with everyone else, but what my concern is I'm worried about the environment a little bit, because if we have the at-call system coming up, let's say
because your amendment is actually just about the report.
Oh, okay.
At this time, you really just need to be speaking about the amendment, which is the report.
I think it's very self-explanatory, just a report to come back after 12 months.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Servais, would you like to talk? Okay. Anybody else like to speak to the formal amendment about bringing a report back to council? Councillor Lawrence?
I'd just like clarification from Councillor Sypek as to...
just if you can put the clarification through me, and then I'll have to decide.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, through you to Councillor Sypek. Just clarification as to what's in the report.
I don't know that Councillor Sypek.
I can try.
What's in the report? What are you envisaging would be
just
in the report,
to see
Councillor
whether it is financially better for council and better for the community, whether the community have accepted the new way of collecting hard rubbish, and just basically everything that goes along with this hard rubbish, whether it is a better way of doing things. Have we increased or decreased the amount of rubbish that we're collecting? So it'll be just mainly statistics and costs.
Okay. So in the report, mainly statistics and costs.
My concern, Madam Mayor, if I can continue the clarification, is that the amendment is changing before my very eyes. So this is an amendment to the amendment?
No, sorry. The amendment, it's just the receive a report back in 12 months.
on the financial and community benefits
Financial and
of
community benefits of the new system. Okay. Well, that was not in the first. That was not in the first. That was not what was seconded by Councillor Serace. What was seconded by Councillor Serace, which was what was read out by Councillor Sypek, was receive a report back to council after 12 months.
And
So if we can just take a step back for a moment, and I guess this is what's problematic when things aren't written down. So my understanding of your amendment, Councillor Sypek, is receive a report or bring a report back to council after 12 months. Back in 12 months. And that's what was seconded.
It's very simple.
Okay. So Councillor Lawrence, hopefully that allays your concerns with that. That's what was moved and seconded earlier. Did you wish to continue speaking on the amendment, on the point C?
My concern is that very fact that it doesn't detail what we hopefully... I mean, I'm in agreement with Councillor Sypek that that's what we would like to hear, but a report can be 3 words, let's face it.
Okay.
Here's the report.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any other councillor wish to speak just on the amendment? Councillor Cusack?
I know that we've been searching for what the parameters of this might be. I've just jotted down several of them while we've been having this discussion. Things like clearly the service response from people as they're being booked, the capacity for the system that manages this to actually cope and pass on the jobs, if you like, the volume of demand and the volume as it's prescribed, how is that setting, the costs that are associated with additional things, how are they received, the potential question about the availability of vehicles and so on like that. So if I want to book it on day X, how long is a reasonable period of time before it gets picked up on X++ or whatever that might be. The impact on existing recycling arrangements and the impact on the depot, for instance, and the transfer station. The kinds of things that come into my mind. Plus also, are there any other questions in respect of having plant and equipment that are needed for this? Or maybe we can keep several vehicles just out on the road and do it in a smart sort of way. But I mean, the booking system will have to sort that. So at the end of it all, it's about proposals and recommendations for improvement at the end of the 12 months as well.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Anyone else like to speak about point C? Thank you, Councillor Byrne.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I think sometimes as councillors we put in a little bit too much red tape, to be honest. I think that Councillor Sypek's amendment is receive a report back in 12 months. And I think sometimes as councillors we probably need to think up here, not lower, and have some sort of trust that when a report comes back it is going to give the detail that would be assumed in a report. I think that if we start listing exactly what we want in the report, chances are we probably won't get everything. And I think that there needs to be that sort of respect, acknowledgement, agreement, however you want to call it, between councillors and officers, that the report will come back detailed. And on top of that, obviously in strategic briefings and whatnot, we have time to ask questions, and if there needs to be additions, then there potentially can be, because who knows what will come up. So I'm definitely happy with receiving a report. Don't think we need to list exactly what needs to be in there, because I think that the people who would be writing the report have put forward a good report now, and in 12 months' time they'll put forward another good one. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Any other councillor wish to speak about point C? Councillor Nation?
I'm just curious, what defines success in this instance? If a report comes back and says that we've collected more hard waste and it's cost us more, is that a good thing because it means people are generating more somewhat recyclable waste? So while a report will have all the details we need, I think any report you've got to take with a grain of salt, because in this instance, a report that comes back and says, for example, hypothetically, that it's cost us an extra $100,000 a year could actually be a positive, because it means that people are actually recycling their hard waste. So, but I concur with you, Councillor Byrne, that you would expect a report that comes before us would have all the details we need to make an informed decision. That's all I've got to say on the report.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Anybody else regarding point C? I shall put the formal amendment, which is point C, to the vote now. So all those in favour, receiving a report in 12 months, that's carried unanimously. So that now becomes a substantive motion, which is now what we will begin discussing again. So I will, Councillor Sypek, had you finished discussing the substantive motion?
Well, I'd like to make a few comments about what I think about the substantive motion. And the reason why I asked for the report is I think the community needs to give us their feedback on how they would like this new system, whether it's working for everyone or whether it's not working for everyone. One of the concerns that I have is, let's say, there's 10 houses in the street, and there's 10 different call-outs over a 2-week period. So that means our truck will drive 10 times to the same place. Whereas in the old system, the truck would just go along the street and get it all done. So the pollution that the truck will cause could be an increase doing it at call system. Secondly, I don't really like the thought of our residents having to pay anything a little bit over the 2 cubic metres, which is a great concern to me as well too. So as I can see the benefits in it, I can also see the negatives. And for me, I think it was crucial that we get the report to come back, because in the report, I think our officers will detail all the information, whether we get a lot of complaints or whether we get a lot of feedback from the community. Look, it could be all positive, but I'm just playing devil's advocate here a little bit, because I can see the good and I can see the bad of going to this new system. And look, if this new system costs us, 3 times as much money, we've got to have a think about this, because we are in a rate capping situation, and we've got to look at ways of becoming more efficient, not becoming more expensive.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Any other councillor wish to speak to the substantive motion? No. Okay, I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Race, Councillor Nation, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Lawrence. All those against? Councillor Sypek. That's carried. The next report is a response to a petition regarding Park and Rides shuttle bus service. Councillors, do I have a motion, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Lawrence, thank you. Councillors, are there any questions regarding this item? Councillor Sorais, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. It's really basically a cost versus patronage. An average of 20 people were using this system at a cost of $185,000 per annum, with an average of 196 trips per week, with an average cost of $18.15 per one-way trip. A review in August 2018 reduced the service to 1 per day, which there was a decrease in passengers to 6 per day, with an estimated cost of $92,500 per annum. A survey of the passengers determined that they would cease using this shuttle service if they were required to pay. So I support the officer's recommendation in this, because for us to provide a service to approximately 6 people of $92,500 per annum, I think is financially quite irresponsible, and I think we can do better things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. Councillor Lawrence, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I concur with my fellow councillor, Councillor Sorais, on all those points. It's interesting to note that the petition came from the ATO, and whether they were the bulk of the users of the shuttle service, I'm not sure because it doesn't actually tell me in the report, but if they were, then it's the ratepayers who are helping our friends at the Australian Taxation Office do their job, which I'm sure they would not be happy about. But anyway, I can't prove that, of course, and but I certainly agree with the officer's recommendation that it's a cost to council to carry on this service, and with the opening of extra parking spots in and around the Moonee Ponds activity centre, it's certainly going to alleviate that situation where cars couldn't park whilst the Cadence development was going on. So no, I think it's a good move by council officers to say enough is enough.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any other councillor wish to speak to this? Sorry, I sort of both of you at the same time pretty much, but Councillor Nation, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I commend the members of our community who may live, definitely work in our city for bringing this to our attention, because I feel that with parking in Moonee Ponds, as a council, we're sending mixed messages. We got on our website talking about how we need to be bold and innovative with our parking, how we're trying to take traffic out of the precinct. Now, here is a proposal, or here is a project that has done those things. Now, yes, at the moment, especially since it was scaled back to one bus, it's quite expensive. But we go out there preaching these alternatives, and then when there's something like this that was working until that second bus was taken off, and then the numbers dropped as per the report, we just shut it down purely based on cost. I'm not saying that the economics of this stack up at all, but at the moment in that Moonee Ponds Activity Centre, the Caden development's not providing parking. Yes, for some of its residents, not all of its residents, not many of its residents, if you look at it, probably a third of its residents. It's not providing public parking either. So yes, a few parking spots on Homer and Hall Street on the street have freed up, but that's it. Council a couple of years ago was speaking about options for Shooter Street and Hall Street, where council's got at-grade parking options. Nothing's since transpired. So projects like this, and you see the one at Essendon Fields, and yes, that's funded by Essendon Fields, but that's a whole nother kettle of fish, but they have a similar scheme. It's just, I completely understand the workers, the traders, how they're getting mixed messages from council. There is a major issue with traffic in that precinct. It's going to get worse as more and more people move in, and more people, and hopefully more people work in that area as well. And so as a council, we need to look at how we continue to manage pedestrian flow, traffic flow, and promote the use of public transport. So yes, we might be shutting this down based on cost, but I think the report acknowledges that was primarily because a second bus was taken off. But if we think that now that the Caden development has finished, that the parking problems in Moonee Ponds are solved, then I tell you, go down there anytime during the day, drive down there, have a look at all the vehicles going in and out of that Caden site, and you'll appreciate the real problem we have with traffic in that area. So I commend the people on the petition for putting this forward. I won't support that motion. I believe that we need to do what our website says and be bold, take some bold measures to ensure our limited parking resources can be shared fairly, look at alternative ways of encouraging pedestrian and traffic flow. We can't just shut this down completely. Let's have a look at ways that we can manage traffic better in that area, because if we don't, then people won't work there, people won't recreate or shop there, and the precinct will just be a residential precinct. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Nation. Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I will be supporting this motion. I think I think it's a good idea to look at this particular project not as a failure but as a learning, because whilst you look at the numbers and they don't stack up, and I agree with Councillor Serace, it would be financially irresponsible to continue this project as it is. I do concur with Councillor Nation that something does need to happen, that we do need to be trying these things, and we're not going to, they say the best learnings can come from failures, and I would say that this hasn't worked and is a failure, but it's what we then get from this, and maybe it's worth going back to the 6 people who were using it or the 20 people before then and see exactly why they were using it. Was it because they lived next door to where it took off from? Were they working there? What's the rationale behind it? And potentially not go down the same stream, but go down something slightly different, because there are models like this that work and this one hasn't for whatever reason, and maybe it might work in the future. Maybe it shouldn't be on a shuttle bus. Maybe it should be on a different type of transport. Who knows? But I think that how do I put this? We're doing some really exciting things in Moonee Ponds. I love Moonee Ponds, and whilst it receives a lot of criticism, it is such a thriving and exciting place within our municipality. There's no doubt that there's some traffic issues, but that's because it's so awesome. Like, we were down there for the ice skating. Well, there was a few of us down there for the ice skating opening, and there is so much going on. There's a lot to be done, and there's work that's going into that. And I think this is just a piece of a puzzle that didn't quite fit, and we just need to find the piece that does.
Thanks. Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Any other councillor wish to speak to this item? Councillor Cusack.
I won't go as far as Councillor Nation to not support the motion. I think it's sensible to pull up stumps at this point. But I'm absolutely in Councillor Byrne's space and want to share that also, and the points that Councillor Nation has raised in respect of we need to continue to explore, to do alternative things and to find other ways to make common sense decisions, or get in place common sense answers to common problems, which is the common problem I can't find with park in this neighbourhood. Now, the common problem is the car, and we need to get that out of the bloody equation. Everybody's bringing their car and want to park in the front door of the shop that they're going to, and it's quite absurd. We have a plan that is around the MPAC and the Moonee Ponds Activity Centre area, and that is just formulating. It's going through a process of consultation, which is about clearly moving cars out of that centre space, developing it as a walking area, developing it as a shopping and retail precinct. And I hear people saying to me, but I can't drive my car there. Well, you can't drive your car into the middle of High Point to the 4th floor or whatever it is, or into the bloody food mall. You have to get out and walk as well. So what we need to do is, maybe this was an idea before its time. Maybe when Cadence is finished, maybe when we started to get the circular MPAC arrangement out there and so on like that, and maybe when one day Puckle Street changes its face altogether and becomes that beautiful avenue that the MPAC suggests it could be, then we need to also bring in things like a shuttle bus service, because there are people who find it difficult. There are people who need to do it. It is an equity issue and so on like that. But we also need to be able to find other sustainable answers as well. So there's a mesh of things, an integration of activities that need to be brought to place. And I do agree with Councillor Byrne that this needs to be a learning experience about what's the best way to do it. It's really, I find it interesting that how, while we've got more cars coming into the area, choking it up, it was the traders who were saying right from day one that people weren't going to be able to get into their shops. Now, I do know that obviously some of the shops have closed, but that's always been the nature, that churning thing of Puckle Street and its surrounds. So that's not the sole issue. And there's been a great deal of creativeness by the workers in those shops and the workers at the tax office to get around it. Some of those issues some of their solutions aren't the best for our community, and we need to work our way around that.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Sorais, would you like to close?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of notes in relation to the report with regards to this. In regards to the reference to the Moonee Valley 2040, however, it relates to the activation of activity centres in relation to Objective 8.2. It says it enhances our activity centres as places for entertainment and gathering. The shuttle bus was implemented for a pilot period to ease the parking congestion in the town centre during a period of construction by the Caden Property Group. Under the social impact assessment, it also states that operating the park and ride shuttle service reduce the availability of vehicles available for community groups and the regular service of providing community transport, particularly to residents who are seniors or living with a disability. So perhaps, as it was mentioned by a couple of councillors earlier, we can review this and look at this further down the track once Cadence has been finished being developed. And also there was somewhere in the report about a reduction in parking availability at the Moonee Valley Racecourse. So there's a lot of issues that need to be taken into consideration, but I think for now what we need to do is be financially responsible and saying, okay, for the small amount of people that were actually using it, it is a large figure to be expended, and also the lack of availability for these community buses for community groups. So therefore I support the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Sorais, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Cusack, Councillor Lawrence. All those against? Councillor Nation, Councillor Sharp. That is carried. Next item is 10.6, submission to the Local Government Bill 2019. Councillors, do I have a motion, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that Council resolves to A, endorse the submission in response to the Local Government Bill, a reform proposal discussion paper with the following amendments. Item 1, the deletion of the first part of the first sentence on page 124, whilst we thus support the option of single-member wards in principle. And 2, the addition of a sentence that Moonee Valley does not support single-member wards in this municipality. And B, send the submission to the Minister for Local Government, the Honourable Adam Somyurek, MLC, with copies provided to the Member for Essendon, Mr Danny Pearson, MB, and the Member for Nidri, the Honourable Ben Carroll, MP.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Seconder for that motion. Councillor Sypek? Thank you. Councillors, are there any questions regarding this item? No. Councillor Sorais, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Moonee Valley Council is pleased to have the opportunity to provide feedback on the Local Government Bill reform. The electoral structures, one of the most substantial reforms proposed in the new bill, is the abolition of multi-member wards. This is a substantial change from the directions paper, which offered two options. 1, to allow for one of 2 representative structures, unsubdivided or entirely uniform multi-member wards, or 2, allow for one of 3 representative structures, unsubdivided, entirely uniform multi-member wards, which is our current situation, or entirely single-member wards. Under the issues, on June 17, 2019, the Minister for Local Government, the Honourable Adam Somyurek MLC, announced the Local Government Bill 2019 and released a discussion paper, Local Government Bill 2019, a reform proposal. It is proposed that a new bill will be presented to Parliament in 2019. Its implementation would be staged to 2021. While the new bill will carry forward many of the intentions of the 2018 bill, new reforms are also proposed which include closer alignment between council electoral roles and the state electoral roll, simplification of representative structures and election processes, including the introduction of a single member ward structure across all Victorian councils, with the exception of large rural municipalities, mandatory training for council candidates and mandatory councillor induction training, donations reform, including the capping of single donor donations for all municipalities except the City of Melbourne at 1,000, improved conduct processes, including arbitrations for conduct complaints to be managed by the Principal Councillor, Conduct Registrar, rather than Council, and standards of conduct specified in the regulations, which will form part of Councillor Codes of Conduct. My concern, and I think we've had discussions about this in briefings, is that single-member councils and representations and wards do work in probably regional councils, or where there are councils that have geographically large, sparse gaps between areas, for people to be able to cover the areas that they are in. But I believe that, in my view, from the City of Moonee Valley, we have 3 wards and 3 councils in each of those wards, and in my view, I believe that this works well. I just have concerns that if there were a single member ward in the City of Moonee Valley, if someone was unwell or someone for some ever reason was absent from council for some period of time, there wouldn't be a backup for those people to be able to represent the community in that particular area. So that's why I've moved this motion. I hope that I get that supported.
Thank you, Councillor Sorais. Councillor Sypek, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Sorry, forgot to turn my mic on. I agree with most of the changes that the Minister would like to introduce, but I do agree with the single and multi-member wards. I've been a councillor in both single-member wards and multi-member wards, and I've seen the good and the bad on both sides. I personally think, like every council is completely different with the needs and the requirements of the community, I also believe the representation for each council is different. And I think it should be self-determined by every council how they would like their representation. I think the community should have a say in this, not just a stroke of a pen and one glove fits all. This is not a system, I think, that will work for everyone. I think there'll be a lot of problems in a lot of councils because they're used to a certain type of representation. I know there are some councils that are single-member wards and it works for them, and that's fine, I understand that. There are some that have a combination. Some are multi-members and some are single wards out in the country, in the rurals. It works for them. I think the community can determine what works for them, whether they like single-member or multi-member wards. So even though I second this motion, I totally agree. I think it shouldn't be just a blanket, single-member wards across the league, but I'm happy with everything else in this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Cusack.
This is a submission on behalf of Council to an Act of Parliament. This is not a submission to the Victorian Electoral Commission about how elections will be conducted in this municipality. And that is a significant distinction, and that's why I can't support Councillor Sorais' motion. I fully understand, if this was a submission going to the VEC about how the next election might be run and whether we do single or multi-member or whatever, I'd be in your banging the drum with you, Councillor Sorais, in 2 seconds flat. But this is not the vehicle for actually doing that. What we've said in the document that has been circulated with the papers for this meeting is that we disagreed with the government's single-member approach, and what we're proposing and have supported is option 2, which allows for the 3 options. The one that reflects the City of Melbourne, where there is no ward, or there are no wards, sorry, pardon the language, there are no wards, there are just councillors covering the area, or there are multi-member wards, or there are single wards, or if you have multi-member, you can also have some single wards that make up that area. And that's what we're saying in this. But we are totally against the allow for one or two representative structures, unsubdivided or entirely uniform multi-member wards. Our option has been for two, to provide that advice to the Minister that we consider that as reasonable. As in all the other parts of this submission, make common sense in that space. I'd be happy to entertain in going to the Minister something that is either in our covering letter or whatever like that, that says, please note that Moonee Valley, while it's supporting this process within the Act, we would, as a council from our own perspective, and in relation to future proposals maybe by the VEC, be strongly endorsing multi-member wards. And that's for very good reasons, because multi-member wards provide the opportunity for more people to be involved in council. It provides that opportunity through proportional representation for different voices to get onto council. It also provides that opportunity for an area to approach different people with different sets of skills and interests and philosophy.
Thank you, Councillor Cusack. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Lawrence.
Just very briefly, Madam Mayor, and thank you for the opportunity. The problem with single wards, although, I mean, it's not a problem for all councils, but it depends on how many councillors we have for a start. And okay, in Moonee Valley we have 9 currently, but there are councils that have 11, maybe even 12 councillors. Now, whether that would work in Moonee Valley is debatable. I guess in the past, under previous structures, it had its problems. And then there's the aspect of, should a councillor retire before his or her time is up or passes away, do we then, I think, go back to a by-election, which is both costly, time-consuming, and it then just adds another layer to the process of electing representatives. These are issues that we have to sort out now, each to their own, and I think the possibilities are hopefully going to be there that councillors can select the appropriate ward structure and council structure that suits their municipalities. There are already municipal councils in Melbourne anyway that have single ward councillors, and it works for them. I'm not advocating, I'm not personally in favour of it. I think it's a better way to structure our wards with 3. And I guess we want to have that option, and that I think is hopefully what's going to occur. We don't want it for Moonee Valley, I understand that, and I hear what Councillor Sarras is suggesting. I just think we should be giving the option across the board so that we can select what is appropriate for our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion?
Mayor, can I foreshadow motion?
Foreshadow a motion?
If this one is lost.
Yes.
And that is to the recommendation that is in the officer's report.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Cusack. No other councillor wish to speak to this motion? I shall ask Councillor Sarras for closing.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So my motion was to also endorse a submission in response to the local government bill. All I was seeking was the deletion of the words, the first part of the sentence on page 124, which said, whilst we thus support the option of single-member wards in principle, and to include a further sentence that says that Moonee Valley does not support single-member wards in the municipality. So following on from that page 124, the words were, we have previously provided, we do not support a full conversion to single-member wards. We are concerned that this proposal is too far removed from previous proposals discussed as part of the Local Government Act reform process, and that the argument for this proposal does not appear to have been substantiated. So basically there hasn't been any evidence to date to let us know that this has been the best thing since sliced bread. And there's also concern that mandatory single-member wards would reduce the diversity of Victorian councils, restricting the capacity for women and candidates from diverse communities to be elected to council. Analysis has shown that 41.4% of councillors in multi-member ward councils are women, compared to only 33.9% in single-member ward councils. There's probably a lot of argument and debate that could go on about that, but from my perspective, I would hope that those few minor changes that I've made from the original motion that was put in the papers would be supported by council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. I shall put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Race, Councillor Sybeck, Councillor Nation, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Lawrence. All those against? Councillor Cusack. That is carried. The next report is notices of motion, and we do not have any notices of motion tonight. I don't believe we have any items of urgent business. No. Do councillors have anything that they'd like to report on in their roles as delegates? No. Confidential reports, there are none this evening, so that effectively closes our business on tonight's agenda. But before I leave, I would just like to make a note that NAIDOC celebrations began with a council ceremony, flag raising ceremony yesterday, and are continuing during the week. So please check out our website if you want to get along to any of those events. And also Winterfest is still operating throughout the last week of the school holidays. So we have the ice skating rink at Pratt Street, Moonee Ponds, and the ice slide at Essendon North Village in Lake Street. So we hope you get along to enjoy hopefully all those different celebrations that we have going on over the next week. Happy NAIDOC week, and we shall see you next week. Thank you.